Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I am your host, Mark Roberti, CEO and founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Now, one of the interesting things about success is that people have different ways of viewing it and how it happens and what you have to be doing in order to achieve success. And we have a great guest who views success from a bottom-up perspective, who has helped others achieve massive success in their careers, in their relationships, within their communities, and he knows a lot about the political realm as well. So it's going to be very interesting to hear his perspectives on this bottom-up philosophy for success. So today's guest who joins us, he is an award-winning journalist, inventor, software architect, connector, and visionary. He's written articles for places like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, ABC, the Huffington Post, Success, Discover, and so many other places as well. He's given talks and workshops to Fortune 500 executives and national medical and psychological organizations. He hosts some of the world's smartest, most interesting, and powerful people on his bottom-up radio show. Just to give you an idea, Jack Dorsey was actually one of the guests on his show and the CEO of Craigslist as well. So he's had a lot of incredible people on his show. His site, opednews.com, has been seen over 23 million times by visitors all across the globe. His latest book, The Bottom-Up Revolution, teaches people how to master the emerging world of connectivity. So today's guest for episode 358 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Rob Kall. Rob, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. You've got a very interesting show. I appreciate being in the company of the people you've had as guests.
Rob, I'm so happy to have you on the show. Just for background, Rob and I met at the National Publicity Summit, and just with a few minutes to talk with this guy, I knew I needed to have him on the show because he has such a great perspective on success. He's achieved a lot of success, helped people achieve success. So we'll definitely get into a lot of that. But before we do, can you just give us some background on how this bottom-up philosophy for you first came into play and when you started advocating for it?
Well, it started for me with my website. I started a personal blog, and it started taking off, and then it started going wild. And I started getting a lot of people submitting articles and content to it, and the traffic kept growing and growing. And I started having hundreds and then thousands of writers writing for me, and hundreds of thousands of readers, and dozens of volunteers who were volunteer editors. And it was a real growth process for me because I didn't know about blogging, and it was all a new experience to me. And this was I started it in 2003. So blogging was still in a kind of early formative stage then. And I made mistakes. And I went to my readers and my writers and my volunteers, and I asked for their advice and I asked for their input, because I learned once I started making mistakes, maybe I should ask before I make the mistakes. How do I do things? How do I make policies? And I got great feedback, and I looked at it and I said, this is bottom up. This is getting my clients, the people who are my contributors, to participate in making the decisions on how to make the site work. And so I had this epiphany. Bottom up is really cool. How else can I understand where bottom up applies? And then I looked and I saw Google. Google in 2003 was already doing amazing. They had already surpassed Alta Vista and Yahoo as the top search engines. And what did they do? They had a very bottom-up algorithm. Basically, the top result for Google was the website that had more other websites linking to it than anyone else. And that's totally bottom-up because it's all about connections. Bottom-up, I talk about bottom-up, but most people don't really get what bottom-up is or know what it is. If they have any idea, they think about it as being grassroots or wisdom of the crowd or crowdfunding or the comments on Amazon or Yelp. But it's really, it's more than that. And this was part of my bottom-up journey that I discovered what the different ways that bottom up had meaning. And one of the big ones was to discover that humans evolved to be unbelievably bottom up in the way their brains work, their endocrine systems work, that humans literally have hundreds of different genes that are bottom up genes that affect how we relate with other people, how we relate with nature, how we see the world. And that's the way humans evolved, as hunter-gatherers in bands, not even tribes, in bands of 30 to 80 people. And that's the way humans existed for about 7 million years, if you look at our predecessors. And that's the way we were until civilization appeared. Now, the earliest civilizations came about 10,000 years ago, but hundreds of millions, if not billions of people became civilized or were first exposed to civilization 500 years ago. And civilization changed things. Civilization is very top down. Civilization has hierarchy and centralization. It has domination, power over, where as compared to power with, which is the way hunter-gatherer bands worked. And civilization started repressing a lot of the aspects of bottom-upness that humans have. And what I believe, and the reason I got excited and started thinking about doing a book on this, was that the internet and smartphones have reversed that. Internet and smartphones have catalyzed the return to bottom up, a massive explosion. Because I think that being bottom up with 7 million years of evolution may be the biggest trend in human, not history, but human existence. It goes way past history. So, you know, you look at people like Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and Craig Newmark and the founders of LinkedIn and countless other bottom-up social media sites. They figured it out. They tapped this power, this bottom-upness of who we are, and they became wealthy with it and successful with it. And I think that if you're born after 1980, you have a more bottom-up brain than somebody who was born before 1980, because you were immersed, at least as a teenager or even more, in these new technologies, and they change the way you see the world and you relate to other people and the world.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's amazing philosophy. Again, more detailed in the book. For everyone watching the video on YouTube, this is what the book looks like. I strongly recommend you get your copy. And Rob talks about the whole hierarchy. That's the top-bottom approach versus the bottom-up. He goes in a lot of detail throughout the book, in particular in chapter 1. And it's interesting hearing his story about how he grew op-ed news. One of the focuses is he had a lot of people contribute, and there are a lot of blogs you see, like the Huffington Post, another great example where, yes, one person starts, or maybe like a team, like a small team of people, and you could say for any social media company also, but it's the users who are coming in, contributing, sharing value to that community, then sharing the content with their audiences, that approach being really effective. I'm wondering how you go about getting great voices on op-ed news, and what that approach is like to get people to contribute. Okay,
so first, can I talk a little bit about blogging in general and why people should do it?
Definitely. I think it's a great area, so go for it. Let us know.
The thing with I started blogging because I had some ideas that I wanted to get out there. And I wrote an article and I submitted it to a bigger website, and I had done freelance writing with magazines, with print magazines in the past. But this was the first time I submitted an article to an online site, and they ran it within 2 hours. It was like, wow, because, you know, with print magazines, it could take a month to hear back saying, and I mean, one time I wrote something and I got back in a letter a month later saying, this is in the top 10% of the stuff we reject.
Wow.
But I got this one accepted, and then I sent them more. I sent them 10 more articles, and they never responded at all. So I decided I could do this myself. I built my first website in 1995, which is pretty early on, and I decided I'd do it. And I decided that I would respond to people if they sent me an article too. So at first I was doing this using some pretty primitive software, but, you know, That's my history. What I want to get into really is why to blog. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are trying to get their books out, trying to be successful in whatever endeavor they're doing. And I ask them, are you blogging? And so many of them say they're not, even though they're writing a book. And what I think is most people think about blogging in a top-down kind of a way. Now, a top-down way of thinking is one to many. Bottom-up thinking is many to many. Now, young people grew up texting many to many people at the same time. I mean, my kids, and they're not young now. I mean, my oldest is 38, and another's 35, one's 29. They all would be texting a whole bunch of kids all at once at the same time, and that's the way texting works. But a lot of people think of blogging as publishing something and then putting it out there for everybody to read. And that's not the way to think about blogging. The way to think about blogging is building a community, building a collection of relationships, and getting people to comment. If you're going to do blogging, you have to have comments. And if you write blogs and you're writing entries into blogs, write them so that they encourage people to participate in a conversation. Because you want to have a relationship. That's the bottom-up way of doing the internet, really. You want to have connection. At one point, I came to the conclusion that we had transitioned from an information economy to a connection economy when Facebook passed Google in views and users, because Facebook's all about connection. And really, Google is a lot about connection too. But I really think that that's where we are. So when you're thinking about bottom up, think about connection. Connection is one of the most important words that you're going to get into with bottom up thinking. And when you're thinking about blogging, you want to think about the people who are participating in your conversation that you're starting. Now, how do you get other people great names? You ask. You ask and you ask and you ask. Now, you mentioned, Mark, that we met at the National Publicity Summit. People attend there to learn how to get skill and make connections with media. And one of the things that they teach the people attending there is you don't ask once. You know, I have my site set up as a nonprofit, and in the early days, I would ask every 2 or 3 months for a donation. Now I ask many times a day. I've got it automated and set up, and when somebody submits something or somebody reads something, they're going to be asked for a donation. They're going to ask. I'm going to ask for help, because there's not a lot of money in blogging necessarily. It can be. I mean, it used to be a lot better. Google used to pay a fortune, and other advertisers did as well, and that's really changed. I mean, just Google, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars in advertising, which paid for my bills basically. But you want to get into getting people to share their information. And an awful lot of people are willing to let you republish what they've already published somewhere else. And that's a good way to get started. So if you see somebody who's writing that you like, let's say it's on Medium or on some other blog, write them. Ask them if you can have permission to reprint it, and that you'll link back to the original source or wherever they want you to link back. And a lot of times you'll get a yes. And that helps you to get better quality writers. And sometimes you can ask people to do an interview with you. One way to do an interview is like we're doing with video. Another way is to do it with audio. We're using Zoom. Other people use Skype. For audio, there are all kinds of different free conference lines that you can Google and find that'll save an MP3 file for you. But another thing you can do is use something like Google Drive and do the interview in text. And a lot of people like that because it actually takes up less focused time. You start off, you create a file, you ask them a couple questions, maybe 2 or 3 questions, you share it with the person you're doing the interview with, they reply, you add a couple more questions, and before you know it, you've got a full transcript interview that's done. And that's a really easy way. And one of my writers has done at least 400 of those with some best-selling top authors. And it's amazing that you can, but you got to ask, and you may have to ask 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And if you persevere, I mean, I know personally, I do a show and I'm very selective. I've had as guests on my show Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners. Bernie Sanders has been on a couple times, Glenn Greenwald, Craig Newmark from Craigslist, and Arianna Huffington, Robin Chase, the founder of Zipcars. And I get them because I try. I mean, there are some that I've asked 3 or 4 times, 5 times, and then they finally come on. And so you need to be persevering. And I'm, on the other end, I get people who pitch me, and you know, I'll say, well, it doesn't really work for me, and they'll try again, and they'll try again. And the ones who really try a lot, I'm really receptive to them. I want to try to make it work. So that's another consideration. And I've been going on a long time. Questions, comments?
I mean, really amazing insights. I mean, just about the blogging and building the community alone, really impressive. But I can relate to asking more than once to either get on someone's shows or book someone as a guest. I mean, there are like a few people who I've been reaching out to for a few years now who I'm still trying to get on the show. But the way you get them, you just got to keep asking, as Rob mentioned, which is a really great point. And one of the things also in his book that I want to mention is he says something really incredible in the book, among other great things he says. But one of the things that really stuck with me was for a business sense, you can reach far more people than the number of followers you have. And Rob talks about how you do that on places like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and a bunch of others. So rather than share all that information, because there's a lot of it in the book, I'm wondering if you could share with us what is your favorite social network to use and how you use it for reaching out to more people.
It's a love-hate relationship. Probably, you know, you know, there's been new talk recently about the need to dismantle Facebook because it's so powerful and Mark Zuckerberg is so powerful. And I agree. His co-founder wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that everybody should read, really. But I use Facebook a lot. I've joined hundreds of Facebook groups that are relative to the content that I'm generating, different content for different groups for different content. And when I write an article, I'll share it to 20 or 30 or 40 different Facebook groups. And so I probably use Facebook because if Facebook, you know, I generally will join a group if it's got more than 5,000 members. I've started a few that have less than that right now, but if I'm going to join a group, I'm going to join one that's worth joining in terms of having the potential to reach a lot of people. And some of them have tens of thousands, even 6-figure quantities of people who are on them. So, and I got this from a friend and one of my writers, Stephen Fox. He's joined over 1,000 Facebook groups, and he says everybody should. Now, I'm not saying join that many, but you know, you go to Facebook, and the book describes how you find the groups, and it's pretty easy to do. And then you join them, and then it's pretty easy to share your content with those groups. So I would say Facebook first, and I think I get more responses there. I like Twitter, but I don't. You know, I just saw you've got a book on that, on how to get more retweets on Twitter. I got to get a look at that one.
Yeah, that will be in the show notes. markberry.com/retweets is the link for anyone who's interested. That's plural, so retweets for that ebook. But it's really great to hear about the Facebook groups because I feel like a lot of people, they think they have to build this tribe of like 1 million people before they can get any kind of good results. But there are people who they have the audiences all laid out for you, and all you do is you just go in there and provide value. I mean, that's the bottom-up philosophy we've been talking about in this episode, and Rob definitely goes a lot deeper in the book. And I know going back, like you help people become successful. You've talked with all these Fortune 500 executives. So you've been able to meet some really awesome people. When you're around those kinds of people, I mean, you become very incredible. So I'm wondering if you could share with us, based on like all the people you've been around and seen, what do you believe holds most people back from really being able to achieve their version of success?
Uh, I think it's being afraid to put their idea out there that it's going to be stolen.
Mm.
I think that, you know, and it's one of the things that Craig Newmark said to me, the founder of Craigslist, said to me when I interviewed him, and I've met him a couple times as well, but and he's an amazing guy. He's such a philanthropist. It's incredible the way he helps to help make positive change happen in the world. But one of the things he said to me was, it's about trust. Trust is so important that you have to trust the universe. If you've got a great idea, you know, if you look at Shark Tank, you know, they're going to ask, well, have you copyrighted it? Have you patented it? And so if you've got an invention, maybe you got to do that first. But a lot of it is passion. A lot of it is getting it out there and then taking a bottom-up approach to it, building a community, building a tribe, as Seth Godin would say, and creating followers and creating a support base and an upwelling. And that's something. And I think that if you're afraid that your idea, which is so brilliant that somebody's going to steal it, you do nothing with it, you hurt yourself. And you've got to have the belief that you can make it work.
Oh, that's very solid, and I definitely see that. I mean, people think they have to go through all these legal hoops before they can really come out with their idea, because again, that fear of the idea being stolen. I mean, there are different stories about how certain ideas are getting stolen, and there's that fear that what if it happens to me? But there's a better chance that the idea is yours if you implement it versus if you don't implement it out of fear. So really great insight from Rob about what's really holding a lot of people back.
Another one is money. You know, in order to be a success online, it takes a lot of money. And, you know, if you go to experts, they can tell you, oh, it'll only cost you $20,000, $50,000 to build a website and get things going. But in my book, I interview people and I describe how you can do it for a couple $100. It doesn't take that much money. And there are resources that you can use, which are mentioned in the book, where you can find people very inexpensively using outsourcing. Using virtual assistants who live in other countries. Now, you know, I would love, and I try when I can, to hire people within the United States. But it works out that sometimes I can't afford to do a project that way, so I'll look for a virtual assistant somewhere else. And that can cost a lot less. And there are websites, you know, I had I had some, not much art in the book, but there's a picture in the book, two pictures that I had done using an old DOS program, and my publisher said it wasn't high res enough. So I had to get it redone. So I went to a site described in the book, and I put out a request for a proposal, and I asked that it basically replicate something like what I had. And I gave a budget of $15. And I got over 40 proposals, some of them for $5, some of them for 10, some of them for 15, some of them for 20 and 25. And I because it's such a nominal price, I awarded that gig to 3 different people. I could see the work they had done. I could see their skill from other projects that they had done. And then I picked 2 that I liked, and then I sent those 2 to my publisher to let my publisher decide which one to use. Same thing with the cover. The cover, actually, you have an advanced reader copy. And can you show it?
Yeah, sure.
So if you look at yours.
This is on YouTube, so everyone listening.
Yeah, for YouTube. There are 6 men on yours. Mine, there are 2 women as well, instead of and 4 men, because women started looking at the cover and they go, hey, there's no women, what's going on? So I went to my publisher and I asked them to change it. They said, no, it's already done. And I said, well, let me change it. And so they said, okay. And so I did. And I hired 2 different artists to make the changes. So the cover now has women as well. So, which was ridiculous that it was that way. So I'm really glad that little thing happened.
And it's really interesting how like you can find these people who are more affordable than what you would think, because I feel like a lot of people, they do think you need a lot of money for a business, but if you don't have money, it does force you to get a lot more creative anytime you do have money to put into the business. So you don't need a big injection of money to really go forward with the business that you're thinking of. And another thing that is really essential for anyone's success are the habits that they develop. So with that in mind, Rob, I'm wondering if you could share with us some of the habits that you would say have been essential for your success.
Well, you know, in the chapter on bottom-up thinking about the internet, I talk about how one of the things that I try to do is I try to think with a bottom-up way of seeing the world. When I look at the internet, I look at it as something that can come to me, and that I can go to the internet and use for crowdsourcing without having to even put anything out there. So, you know, for example, one of the examples that I give is I like quotations. I've collected them over the years. I've even got a quotation website, quotationscentral.com, which is embarrassingly old, and I haven't changed it, but it was fun to do at the time. And you never know whether a quotation is accurate or who actually said it. So what you do is you can search and see, and you can type in some of the words from the quote and see who was attributed to saying it. And sometimes you'll find, well, there's 20,000 people who say that this was Nietzsche, and then there's another 40,000 who say it was Goethe or something like that. And you know, you can use the wisdom of the crowd to figure out that. I do that all the time. For spelling, there are some words that I just have a mental block on spelling, and I'll go and I'll check what's the spelling of something. So you can use the web that way to figure really basic stuff out. Or let's say you're trying to develop a new product. Think about how you want to, who are the people who you're interested in who are creating that product? Do a search on them. Get Google alerts on them. Who are your competitors? Same thing. You want to look at what's hot, then do a Twitter search on hot and the keywords that you're looking at. You can use all of the internet to bring to you information that you don't normally think about. It's not just searching for a thing or a website. It's searching for ideas. It's searching for patterns. It's searching for connections and relationships. Because, you know, really bottom up is very much about relationships and about patterns. One of the other people who really influenced my thinking on bottom up was Fritjof Capra. Earlier on, he wrote the book, The Tao of Physics, the connection between physics and Eastern philosophy. But more recently, he wrote an amazing book called The Systems View of Life. And systems theory is the model of science that has replaced necessarily the old model of science that was Cartesian, and the linear approach that was mechanistic, that broke things apart and looked at everything as though it was a machine. The new model is called systems theory or chaos theory or nonlinear dynamics theory, and that's based on the idea that you study interconnections and patterns. Because the old model didn't work for subatomic physics and it didn't work for ecosystems. The new model does. And I see bottom up as really much closer to that model, looking at the patterns and looking at the relationships. And one of the big goals that I have for the book is to get people to start seeing the world in a more bottom-up way, where they're connection consciousness, because connections are such an important part of who we are. We evolved to be connected beings. And we also evolved, another angle that I cover in the book is story. Story is huge. We evolved to be story processing beings. We tell stories, and we see the world in terms of stories or narratives that we keep in our heads that define who we are, who we relate with, how we're connected to everybody else, and how things work.
Rob, I really love your focus on connectiveness, because the world is a very connected place. That's exactly where we are and where we are going even deeper. So all of your habits seem to align towards that main concept of connectivity, which is something that we should all think about. How can we not just stay connected, but get more connected with more of the right people? So really excellent habits and really excellent insights also throughout this episode. There's a lot for us to implement from this episode on the bottom-up philosophy. Yeah,
let me mention that I got into connection. I believe that connection is so important that it's an essential part of who we are. I mean, if people are not connected to other people, they're depressed, they are isolated, and if you're going to be successful, you don't do it alone. You do it by making effective, smart connections, and they're connections that attract other people. So a couple things in there. One is the idea of attraction. I had a chance to interview one of the interviews that I was most excited about doing was interviewing Joseph Nye. Joseph Nye, if you Google him, is ranked as one of the most respected experts on diplomacy in the world. He's also the head of the Trilateral Commission for the United States, which is a hugely powerful organization. And he wrote the book on soft power and the future of power. And soft power is bottom up. Hard power is weapons, money, force, where you force somebody to do something. Soft power is music, it's arts, it's attraction, it's building bridges and schools. And soft power is the way that you attract people and you get people to like you and to want to work with you. And that's a bottom-up approach, I think, that is so valuable. And I think it ties in really with compassion and empathy. And those are also very important aspects of being in a bottom-up world connection conscious. You want to have these soft powers. And I believe that bottom-up is a kind of intelligence, and we all have bottom-up power within us, in our genes, that if we can tap that power, it can change our lives. But it's not hard power. It's not power that gives you the ability to make people do things. It gives you the power to collect from people their wisdom, to relate with them, to see new patterns of interaction and opportunities, and to build deeper, more meaningful relationships. And that is, that is the kind of power I think that makes leaders successful and makes innovators successful too. So one of the things that I did was I got into trying to understand the idea of positive experiences. And I came to the conclusion that positive experiences are the most valuable things we have. Positive experiences are the building blocks of our ability to be happy, our ability to face adversity, to face challenges, to be in loving relationships. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really solid insight. And if you view the world in a more positive way, that's just going to fuel the bottom-up philosophy, because you're going to want to invite more people. You're going to be more trusting to people who can help not just their business grow, but who you can help grow their businesses. And then it's just a mutual relationship.
So I've given that theory that positive experiences are so valuable to at least 1,000 psychologists and psychiatrists, and never has a single one ever disagreed with me. So I was able to present what I put together was the idea that if positive experiences are so valuable, then you want to have skills for having more, better, deeper, stronger ones and keeping them in the forefront of your attitude and your life. And so I put together an anatomy of positive experiences that I've applied to positive experiences and to the ability to have connection experiences. And the book goes into detail on the different stages of how to have better, stronger, more longer lasting, deeper, more meaningful, positive experiences, and how to connect more effectively. So there are detailed, concrete instructions on how to do that in the book.
Yeah, so that book, Rob's book, we've been talking about it for a while, but we're only really hitting on some of the points in there in this episode. So if you want to read more of the book, that will be in the show notes, markberry.com/E358. Rob, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. I know you have a few other places, opednews.com. So can you just give us an idea on the vibe of connectivity? Where else can you find some of your work?
Probably the best place to get to find out all about my stuff is robkall.com, ROBKALL.com. You can find out, you can get links to order the book either at Amazon or local bookstores or Pals or whatever, or Barnes and Noble. And then also I have a lot of websites that I've built over the years, so they're also there. And you can find out about other media appearances that I have and that I've had. And you can check out my podcasts as well. I've got over 400 interviews that I've done, mostly about bottom up.
Rob, thank you so much for sharing those resources with us. I'm heading towards episode 400 at some point because we're only doing quick math here. We're 42 away. So thank you so much for coming on Breakthrough Success, sharing all of your great insights with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's been really fun. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And like I said before we started recording, I want to have you on my show. I think you've got some great insights and information to share.
Thank you, Rob. Definitely talk about that off the recording. But anyway, Breakthrough Success listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I'm really grateful for each time you guys tune in. So just thank you so much for coming on to listen to the episode.